Hi, friends. Tonight I want to share my friend Alara Johnson with you. I brought her to share her journey with you. Before we start, I also want to thank everyone who watches and supports the channel. Please like and subscribe. Now, let's get back to Alara.
I found my son Marcus in a drainage ditch, his face swollen, his clothes torn, barely able to whisper the words that shattered my world. It was Harry, Mama. He said my low-class blood was disgusting. That's when I knew. A mother's love is the most dangerous thing a wealthy man can underestimate. This is the story of how I took down a man who thought he was untouchable. So, let me tell you about the worst day of my life, and how it became the beginning of justice. My name is Alara Johnson, and at 65 years old, I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me. I live in a small bungalow in Clay County, the kind of house that's been in the family for 3 generations. The paint might be peeling a little and the porch might creak when you walk across it, but it's mine. Paid for with decades of honest work and the sweat of my late husband's brow. My mornings have a rhythm to them, you see. I wake before dawn when the world is still quiet and the birds are just starting to sing in the old pecan tree out back. I make my coffee, the cheap kind from the discount store, not the fancy stuff, and I start baking. Sweet potato pies. Biscuits. Sometimes pecan rolls if I'm feeling ambitious. I sell them at the farmer's market on Saturdays, and to regulars who stop by during the week. It's not much, but it's enough. My husband Thomas passed 10 years ago. Heart attack, sudden as a summer storm. One morning he was laughing at breakfast and by noon he was gone. Left me with this house, 6 chickens and our son Marcus. Marcus. My only child. My miracle boy. He's 30 now and Lord, he's done well for himself. Better than I ever dreamed possible for a boy from our side of town. He wears a suit to work every day. A real suit, not the kind you buy at a thrift store. He works downtown in the financial district, has his own desk, his own computer, his own parking spot. When I see him in that suit, I think about all those nights Thomas and I sat at this kitchen table, counting pennies to make sure Marcus could go on field trips with his class. To make sure he had school supplies. To make sure he never felt less than the other kids, even though we had less than most. And Marcus married well. Skylar Sterling, a girl from one of the wealthiest families in the county. Pretty as a picture, sweet as honey, and from what I could tell, genuinely in love with my son. The Sterlings live in one of those houses with a name instead of just a number. Sterling Manor or some such. The kind of place with columns and a circular driveway and more bathrooms than people. But love doesn't care about bank accounts, does it? At least that's what I thought. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I was elbow deep in pie dough, flour dusting my arms up to the elbows when the phone rang. The old landline that still hangs on the kitchen wall, the same one Thomas installed 30 years ago. I almost didn't answer. I was at a critical point with the crust, and timing matters when you're working with butter that'll melt if you handle it too long. But something made me wipe my hands on my apron and pick up that receiver. Is this Mrs. Johnson? A man's voice. Young. Nervous. This is she, I said, my southern manners automatic even as my stomach started to clench. Am I found a young man on North County Road. He's hurt pretty bad. His ID says Marcus Johnson. That's your son. The world tilted. Where? My voice came out sharp. Where is he? Off the old highway near mile marker 17. The drainage ditch by the abandoned gas station. Ma'am, you need to come quick. I didn't remember hanging up. Didn't remember grabbing my keys or getting in my old Buick. I just remember driving, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, praying words I hadn't prayed in years. Please God. Please. Not my boy. Not Marcus. I saw the drainage ditch before I saw my son. It was one of those concrete channels that runs alongside the highway, meant to carry runoff during heavy rains. Dry now in the late morning sun. Nothing in it but weeds and trash and my son. Marcus was lying at the bottom, one arm bent at an angle that made my stomach turn. His white shirt, the one he loved, the one he wore to church, was torn and stained with blood. His face, oh my dear, his face, swollen, bruised the color of thunderclouds. One eye completely shut. His lips split and bleeding. Cuts on his hands like he'd tried to fight back. A young man, couldn't have been more than 20, was standing at the edge of the ditch, phone in his hand. I called 911, he said when he saw me. But I thought you'd want to know first. I barely heard him. I was already scrambling down into that ditch, my knees hitting the concrete, my hands reaching for my boy. "Marcus," I whispered, touching his face as gently as I could. "Baby, it's Mama. I'm here." His eyes fluttered open. The one that could open anyway. "Mama," he breathed, and I could see how much it hurt him to talk. "Mama, I'm sorry." "Shoo, don't talk. Don't try to talk." "No." He grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "You need to know. You need to know it was." He coughed and I saw blood on his teeth. It was Harry. It was Skylar's father. Each word seemed to cost him. He said my low-class blood was disgusting. Said I was polluting his daughter. The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever felt. Not hot. Not explosive. Calculated. The kind of anger that doesn't scream but plans. "Who did this to you?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "His men. 2 of them. Pulled me out of my car after work. They..." Marcus's voice broke. "They beat me, Mama. They beat me and laughed while they did it." And Harry watched from his Mercedes. Didn't even get out of the car. The ambulance arrived then, sirens cutting through the morning air. Paramedics swarmed down into the ditch, professional and efficient, asking Marcus questions, checking his vitals, loading him onto a stretcher. I rode in the ambulance, holding my son's hand, watching the machines beep and flash around him. And I thought about Harrison Sterling. Harry, everyone called him. Harrison Harold Sterling III if you wanted to be formal about it. Owner of half the commercial real estate in Clay County. Restaurants, development companies, properties all over town. I'd met him exactly twice. Once at Marcus and Skylar's engagement party, where he'd looked at me like I was something unpleasant he'd stepped in. And once at the wedding where he'd given the stiffest, coldest toast I'd ever heard. "To my daughter," he'd said, raising his champagne glass, "who has always had peculiar tastes." Everyone had laughed like it was a joke. But I'd seen Marcus's face tighten. Seen Skylar's smile falter. I should have known then. Should have seen what that man was capable of. At the hospital they took Marcus away for x-rays and scans. I sat in the emergency room waiting area, my hands still covered in flour and blood, and I called the one person I knew would understand. My brother Isaiah. Ike to everyone who knows him, arrived at the hospital within the hour. My older brother is 70 years old, with hands that shake a little from arthritis and a back that's never been the same since his years working construction. But his eyes are still sharp. His mind still sharper. He took one look at me and said, "How bad?" "Bad enough. Broken ribs. Concussion. Bruises everywhere." "Who?" "Harrison Sterling." Ike's jaw tightened. "The slumlord's son." See, that's the thing most people in this town have forgotten. Harrison Sterling didn't build his empire from nothing. He inherited it from his father, Harrison Sterling Sr., the cruelest landlord Clay County ever saw. Back in the 50s and 60s, Sterling Sr. owned half the rental properties on the poor side of town. Black families mostly. He'd raise the rent without warning, evict people in the middle of winter, turn off utilities if payments were even a day late. And our mother, Doris Johnson, had worked as his housekeeper. Mama never talked much about those years. But she saw things. Heard things. And Mama had a mind like a steel trap, she remembered everything. Before she passed 15 years ago now, she called Ike and me to her bedside. "There's a metal box," she told us, her voice weak but clear, "in the attic of Alara's house. I put it there years ago. Documents. Photographs. Letters. Things I saved from the Sterling house." "Why, Mama?" I'd asked. "Because powerful people make mistakes when they think nobody's watching. They get sloppy. They say things they shouldn't say in front of the help, because they don't think the help is smart enough to understand or remember." She'd gripped my hand with surprising strength. "You keep that box safe. One day you might need it. Justice has a long memory, child. So do we." I'd kept that box in my attic untouched for 15 years. Till now. When the doctor finally let us see Marcus, Ike and I went in together. My son looked so small in that hospital bed, surrounded by machines and monitors. His face was even more swollen than before, and they'd wrapped his ribs in bandages. "Uncle Ike," Marcus said, his voice rough. Tears started running down his bruised cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Ike walked over and gently, carefully hugged him. "What are you apologizing for, son?" "For being stupid. For thinking I could marry into that family and it would be okay. For not listening when you warned me that people like the Sterlings don't accept people like us. Stop that, I said firmly. You have nothing to apologize for. You loved a girl and married her. That's not a crime. But Harry Sterling is going to learn something very important, Ike interrupted. He's going to learn that attacking a Johnson was the biggest mistake of his life. Marcus tried to sit up but winced with pain. You can't go up against him. He owns half the police force. He's got judges in his pocket. The whole system protects men like him. Then we won't use the system, I said quietly. We'll use something better. We'll use the truth. Over the next hour Marcus told us everything. It had started a month ago. Marcus and Skylar had been saving money to move into their own place. Nothing fancy, just a small house on the outskirts of town where they could start their life together properly. They'd saved $8,000. Every penny counted, every sacrifice made. Marcus had been so proud. Then Harry had called him into his office at Sterling Development. He offered me $50,000, Marcus said, the memory making him flinch. To leave Skylar. To walk away from the marriage. To get out of the state and never come back. What did you say? Ike asked. I told him to go to hell. Told him I loved Skylar and she loved me and no amount of money would change that. Marcus is good, I met mine. I told him my mama raised me to be a man who keeps his promises, and I'd promised to love Skylar for life. Pride swelled in my chest even as fear tightened around my heart. What did he do? He smiled. That cold smile of his. And he said, we'll see about that. People like you don't understand how the world really works. You think love conquers all. But money conquers love every single time. The next day Marcus had been leaving work when two men approached him in the parking garage. Big men, the kind who look like they break things for a living. They'd said they had a message from Mr. Sterling. Then they'd forced Marcus into a black SUV with tinted windows. They drove him to an empty lot on the industrial side of town. The kind of place where nobody goes after dark. Where there are no cameras, no witnesses. Harry Sterling was waiting there in his silver Mercedes S-Class. Engine running, windows down. Like he was waiting for a show to start. He didn't even get out of the car, Mama, Marcus said, and I heard the humiliation in his voice. He just sat there, comfortable, sipping something from a crystal glass. And he nodded to those men. They'd beaten Marcus methodically. Professionally. The kind of beating that's meant to hurt but not kill. Meant to send a message. And the whole time Harry Sterling watched. When they were done, when Marcus was bleeding and broken on the ground, Harry had rolled down his window just a little more. Tell your mama, he'd said, his voice casual, that this is just a warning. Next time I won't be so gentle. And tell her that low-class blood like yours doesn't mix with Sterling blood. It pollutes it. Then they'd dumped Marcus in that drainage ditch and driven away. By the time Marcus finished his story, my hands were clenched so tight my nails had cut crescents into my palms. Ike's face was like stone. We need to call the police, Marcus said weakly. Report this. And say what? Ike replied. That the richest man in the county beat you up? Who do you think they'll believe? Us or him? Harry probably has half the force on his payroll. Then what do we do? Marcus asked, and I heard the despair in his voice. Just let him win? I stood up and walked to the window looking out at the hospital parking lot. At the ordinary people coming and going with their ordinary problems. And I thought about Mama's box in my attic. No, I said finally. We don't let him win. But we don't fight him his way. We fight him our way. What does that mean? Marcus asked. I turned to face them both and I felt something settle in my chest. Purpose. Direction. The cold fury that had been building since I found my son in that ditch crystallizing into a plan. It means we remember what Mama taught us. The wealthy think people like us don't keep records. Don't remember. Don't notice. But we see everything. We hear everything. And when the time is right, we use it. That night, after the doctors had given Marcus something to help him sleep and I'd kissed his forehead like I used to when he was a boy, Ike drove me home. My little bungalow looked the same as always. Porch light on. Chickens settled in their coop. The pecan tree rustling in the night breeze. But everything felt different. Like I was seeing it all through new eyes. You really think there's something useful in Mama's box? Ike asked as we pulled into the driveway. Mama didn't save things for no reason. He told us that box would be important one day. I think that day is here. We went inside and I made fresh coffee, the real stuff this time, not the cheap kind. Some moments require the good coffee. Then we headed up to the attic. I hadn't been up there in years. The pull-down ladder creaked as we climbed, and the attic smelled like dust and old memories. Boxes everywhere, labeled in my mother's careful handwriting. Christmas decorations. Old clothes. Books nobody would ever read again. And there in the far corner underneath the tarp was the metal box. It wasn't large, about the size of a small suitcase. Gray with a simple lock that opened with a key I kept on my keychain, though I'd never had reason to use it before. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were treasures. Not gold or jewels, something far more valuable. Documents. Dozens of them. Photographs showing Sterling Sr. with various officials. Envelopes of cash visible on tables. Letters written in his handwriting, detailing payments to be made, problems to be resolved. Copies of contracts that had been modified after people signed them. Lists of names with dates and dollar amounts. And a small leather journal in Mama's handwriting. I opened it carefully, the pages yellowed with age. January 15, 1962, the first entry read. Mr. Sterling paid Chief Morrison $500 today. Heard him say it was for looking the other way, about the Henderson property. Mrs. Henderson's husband died last month. Now she can't pay rent. Mr. Sterling plans to evict her and sell the property to the city for 3 times what it's worth. Entry after entry. Years of observations. Names. Dates. Amounts. Every dirty deal Sterling Sr. had made, recorded in my mother's meticulous handwriting. Lord have mercy, Ike breathed, reading over my shoulder. Mama documented everything. She was a witness, I said, my voice thick with emotion. For 30 years she was a witness to how that family really built their empire. On the backs of poor families who couldn't fight back. Near the bottom of the box I found photographs that made my blood run cold. Properties before and after Sterling Sr. acquired them. Families being evicted. Men I didn't recognize standing next to Sterling Sr., their faces hard, their body language threatening. And a list. A handwritten list of names with red marks next to some of them. Jerome Vance. The Morales family. Abraham Washington. Lucille Green. I remember these people, Ike said quietly. They all disappeared. Not disappeared, I corrected, my voice grim. Driven out. Intimidated into leaving. Or worse. I found a newspaper clipping from 1967. Local man dies in suspicious accident. The article was about a man named Wallace Green, a community organizer who had been trying to help small landowners resist Sterling Sr.'s pressure to sell. Mama had written in the margin, no accident. Heard Mr. Sterling on phone saying, the problem is handled. Break lines. This is enough to reopen investigations, Ike said, his voice shaking with something that might have been hope or fear. If we can connect the son to the father's methods. We can, I interrupted. Because men like Harry Sterling don't change. They just get more sophisticated. If his father built the empire on intimidation and violence, you can bet Harry's maintaining it the same way. I closed the box carefully, reverently. This wasn't just evidence. This was my mother's legacy. Her way of making sure that justice, however delayed, would eventually come. Tomorrow, I said, we start making calls. Quietly. Carefully. To people we trust. But tonight. The phone rang downstairs, cutting through the silence like a knife. We looked at each other. It was past midnight. Nobody calls with good news past midnight. I hurried down the ladder, Ike right behind me, and grabbed the phone on the 4th ring. Mrs. Johnson? A young woman's voice. Crying. Mrs. Johnson, it's Skylar. My heart seized. What's wrong, honey? Is Marcus okay? Marcus is fine. He's still at the hospital. It's... She sobbed. It's my father. He knows I went to see Marcus today. And he's furious. He says I'm choosing Marcus over my family. He says if I don't agree to leave town and go to boarding school in Europe, he'll make sure Marcus never works in this state again. He'll destroy him. Where are you now? In my car parked down the street from your house. I'm scared to go home. I'm scared of what my father might do. I didn't hesitate. Come to the door. You're staying here tonight. 5 minutes later, Skylar Sterling was sitting at my kitchen table, still in her expensive clothes but looking like a frightened child. Mascara ran down her cheeks. Her hands shook as she held the mug of tea I'd made her. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't fallen in love with Marcus, none of this would have happened." "Stop that," I said firmly. "Love isn't something to apologize for. Your father's cruelty, that's what needs apologizing for." Ike sat across from her, studying her carefully. "Skylar, I need to ask you something important. And I need you to think carefully before you answer." She looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. "Would you be willing to help us stop your father?" The question hung in the air. Heavy. Dangerous. Skylar could choose her family's wealth and power. Or she could choose justice, knowing it might cost her everything. She wiped her eyes, sat up straighter, and when she spoke, her voice was steady. "My father beat the man I love and left him in a ditch. He's threatened to destroy Marcus's life if I don't obey him. He's turned our home into a prison." She looked directly at Ike, then at me. "He stopped being my family the moment he decided love could be controlled with money and violence. Whatever you need me to do, I'll do it." And that's when I knew. Harry Sterling had made a fatal mistake. He'd assumed that because we were poor we were powerless. He'd assumed that because he had money he had control. He'd assumed that a mother protecting her child would back down when faced with threats. But he'd never met a Johnson woman. And he was about to learn exactly what we're capable of. Over the next 48 hours my house became a command center. Skylar stayed in the guest room, Marcus's old room, with his high school trophies still on the shelf and posters of basketball players on the walls. She'd called her father and told him she needed time to think, that she was staying with a friend. Harry had threatened, demanded. But Skylar held firm. Marcus was released from the hospital on Thursday morning. The doctors wanted to keep him longer, but he insisted on coming home. Home being my house where I could watch over him properly. He moved slowly, painfully, but there was something new in his eyes. Not the beaten-down shame from before. Something harder. More determined. I had spent those 2 days making careful phone calls. To old friends. To people who'd been on the wrong end of Sterling dealings over the years. To a lawyer he'd served with in Vietnam, now practicing civil rights law in Atlanta. And Skylar, sweet, sheltered Skylar, proved to be our secret weapon. "I've lived in that house my whole life," she told us that first night. "I know where my father keeps everything. His private office at home. His safe deposit box at the bank. The files he brings home in his briefcase." She pulled out her phone and started showing us photographs. "I've been taking these for months," she explained. "Since before Marcus and I got engaged. I knew my father was involved in things that weren't right. I just didn't know how wrong." The photographs showed documents spread across Harry's home office desk. Contracts. Payment records. Handwritten notes with amounts and names. "This one," Skylar pointed to a photograph of a ledger, "shows cash payments my father made to someone called the Fixer. $25,000 last year alone." Ike leaned in closer. "Do you know who this Fixer is?" "No. But I've seen him at the house. Big man, scar across his face. My father always meets with him in the basement." I exchanged a look with Ike. "A fixer. The kind of person you hire to make problems disappear." "There's more," Skylar continued, swiping through her phone. "A week ago I heard my father on the phone. He was talking about handling the situation. About making sure the boy understood his place. I didn't know he meant Marcus until..." Her voice broke. "Until I saw what he did to him." She showed us more photographs. Lists of properties. Names of families who'd been evicted. Dollar amounts that didn't match the official records. "My father keeps 2 sets of books," she said quietly. "One for the IRS. One that shows the real numbers." That Friday night we had our first real planning meeting. Marcus, still bruised but healing, sat at my kitchen table. Ike had his old military notepad out, the one he'd carried in Vietnam. Skylar had her phone with all her photographs. And I had Mama's box open in front of me. "Here's what we know," Ike began, his voice taking on the tone of a man who'd commanded soldiers. "Harrison Sterling has been operating outside the law for decades. Following in his father's footsteps, using intimidation, violence, and corruption to build his empire. The question is," Marcus added, his voice still rough from his injuries, "how do we prove it? How do we make sure he can't just buy his way out of this like he's bought his way out of everything else? I spread Mama's documents across the table. We connect the dots, I said. Mama documented everything Sterling Sr. did. How he operated. Who he paid off. Which officials were in his pocket. It's all here. Patterns of behavior, methods, connections. And I can show that my father uses the exact same methods, Skylar added. The same officials. Same tactics. It's like he's following a playbook his father wrote. Ike nodded slowly. If we can establish a pattern spanning 50 years, we can show this isn't just one bad man. This is systematic corruption. That's what gets federal attention. But we need more, Marcus said, leaning forward despite the pain it caused. We need something current. Something that proves Harry is actively breaking the law right now. Skylar bit her lip thinking. There's the safe deposit box. We all looked at her. My father keeps a safe deposit box at First National Bank. I've been with him twice. He has a key and so do I. He gave it to me years ago saying it was for family emergencies. She met our eyes. He keeps cash there. A lot of cash. Money he can't explain. How much are we talking about? Ike asked. I saw inside once 2 years ago. There had to be at least $200,000. In cash. Wrapped in rubber bands. The room went silent. $200,000 in unexplained cash. That wasn't just suspicious. That was criminal. Getting access to that box proves he has assets he hasn't declared, Ike said slowly. That's tax evasion at minimum. And if we can connect that cash to illegal payments. We can, I interrupted. Mama's documents show that Sterling Sr. always kept large amounts of cash for special projects. Same pattern. Marcus shifted in his chair. But how do we get evidence of what's in the box without breaking the law ourselves? We can't just rob it. Skylar squared her shoulders. I have a key. I'm authorized to access the box. What if I went to the bank, told them I needed to review something for my father, and I documented what I found? That's dangerous, I said immediately. If your father finds out. He beats people and leaves them in ditches, Skylar interrupted, and there was steel in her voice I hadn't heard before. I'm already in danger just by being here. At least this way the danger means something. We spent the next hour planning every detail. Skylar would go to the bank on Monday morning early before Harry typically started his day. She knew the bank manager, Mr. Lewis. He'd been doing business with the Sterling family for 20 years. She'd tell him she needed to access the box to retrieve some documents for a family trust. Simple. Believable. Once inside, she'd photograph everything. The cash. Any documents. Anything that could serve as evidence. But I need one of you with me, Skylar said. I can get into the vault, but I'll be nervous. I'll need support. I'll go, I said immediately. Elara, Ike started to object. No. This is my fight. My son lying broken in that ditch. My family being threatened. I'll go with Skylar. The truth was, I didn't trust anyone else with this. This girl. This brave, terrified girl who was risking everything for love. Needed someone who understood what was at stake. And I needed to see with my own eyes the evidence that would bring Harry Sterling down. We were just finishing our planning when the phone rang. It was nearly 11 at night. Late for social calls. I answered cautiously. Hello. Breathing on the other end. Heavy. Deliberate. Then a voice. Male. Distorted like someone was speaking through cloth. If you want justice for the boy, come to the old city cemetery at 10 o'clock tomorrow night. Come alone. I have information you need. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, my heart racing. Who was it? Marcus asked. I don't know. Someone who knows about what happened to you. Someone who says they have information. Ike's expression darkened. Could be a trap. Could be our only chance at getting someone to talk, I countered. Skylar stood up, her face pale. The cemetery? That's where. She stopped. Where what? I asked. Where my father has meetings sometimes. Late at night. With people he doesn't want anyone to see. I heard him mention it once when I was eavesdropping. The pieces were coming together. Someone who knew what Harry was doing. Someone who had access to information. Someone who was ready to talk. Or someone Harry had sent to lure us into making a mistake. Either way, I'd be there. Because a mother protects her child. no matter the cost. The old city cemetery sits on the edge of town, surrounded by an iron fence that's more rust than metal these days. The oldest graves date back to the 1800s, their headstones tilted and weathered, names worn away by time and rain. It's the kind of place people avoid after dark. Not because of ghosts, though Lord knows there are stories, but because it's isolated, quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you hear every snap of a twig, every whisper of wind through the trees. Saturday night at 9:30, Ike, Marcus, and I left the house together. Skylar wanted to come, but we'd all agreed she needed to stay behind. If this was a trap, we couldn't risk Harry's daughter being caught in it. Marcus was still healing, moving carefully, but he refused to be left out. "This is about me," he'd said when I tried to make him stay. "I'm going." So the three of us walked through the dark streets of Clay County, headed toward a cemetery meeting with a stranger who claimed to have information. The night air smelled like magnolias and coming rain. Storm clouds gathered overhead, blocking out the stars. The only light came from street lamps that grew fewer and farther between as we approached the cemetery. "There," Ike murmured as we reached the iron gates. A figure stood among the graves, barely visible in the darkness. Thin, wearing dark clothes and a cap that shadowed his face. We approached slowly, carefully. My hand was in my pocket, wrapped around the small canister of pepper spray I'd brought, just in case. As we got closer, I could see him better. A man maybe 50 years old. There was a scar running down his left cheek from ear to jaw. His eyes darted nervously, constantly scanning the shadows. "You the Johnson family?" His voice was hoarse, like he'd smoked too many cigarettes or yelled too much. "We are," Marcus answered, stepping forward despite his injuries. "Who are you?" The man removed his cap, revealing graying hair and eyes that had seen too much darkness. "Name's Daryl. Used to work for Harry Sterling. Did his dirty work for 10 years. He spat on the ground. Until my conscience couldn't take it anymore." "What kind of dirty work?" I gasped, his military training evident in his stance, his awareness of our surroundings. "Intimidation. Threats. Making sure people who didn't want to sell their property suddenly changed their minds." Daryl pulled an envelope from inside his jacket. "I documented everything. Every job. Every payment. Every family I helped him destroy." He held out the envelope, but when I reached for it, he pulled it back slightly. "You need to understand something. Once you take this, there's no going back. Harry knows someone has dirt on him. He's already sent people looking for me. By giving you this, I'm signing my own death warrant." "Then why do it?" Marcus asked. Daryl looked at my son, really looked at him, taking in the still healing bruises, the careful way he stood. "Because I have a son your age. Working up north, trying to make an honest living. And if I don't stop Harry now, one day my boy might come home. Might fall in love with the wrong girl. And he'll end up in a ditch just like you did." He handed me the envelope. It was thick, heavy with papers. There's everything in there. Photographs of Harry overseeing evictions. Recordings of him ordering violence. Bank records showing payments to enforcers. And most important. He paused. A recording where Harry admits to ordering a hit on Wallace Green back in 2019. I felt the blood drain from my face. Wallace Green. The community organizer who died in a car accident. "It wasn't an accident," Daryl confirmed. "Harry had his brake lines cut. I know because I was there when he ordered it. And I recorded it." "Why didn't you go to the police?" Ike demanded. "Because half the police are on Harry's payroll. The chief gets $5,000 a month to look the other way. Judges get $10,000 to dismiss cases involving Sterling properties. The whole system is rotten." Marcus moved closer. "You're the one who took pictures. When they beat me. I saw a flash." "Yeah. Harry hired me to document it. Wanted proof that you'd been punished." Daryl's voice was thick with disgust. "When I saw those animals beating you, something in me broke. I thought about my own son. And I knew I was done." "What will you do now?" I asked. "Disappear. I've got contacts in other states who can get me new papers. New identity. I'll be gone by morning." He looked at each of us in turn. "But you need to be careful. Harry knows someone has information on him. He's paranoid. Dangerous. He's already talking about sending Skylar away to Europe until this blows over." My heart clenched. What about Marcus? What about my family? Daryl's expression darkened. Last night I heard him on the phone. He said something about permanently cleaning up the problem. Those were his exact words. Time to permanently clean up the problem. The threat was clear. Harry wasn't just trying to separate Marcus and Skylar anymore. He was planning to eliminate us. How much time do we have? Ick asked. Days. Maybe less. Harry's meeting with his lawyer on Monday to discuss options. If you're going to move against him, you need to do it fast. Daryl started walking toward the cemetery gate, then stopped and turned back. There's one more thing. In that envelope you'll find a flash drive. It's got surveillance footage from Harry's basement. Shows him meeting with criminals, exchanging cash, planning jobs. It's time-stamped, dated. Irrefutable. He pulled his cap back on, becoming just another shadow in the darkness. Good luck. You're going to need it. And then he was gone, disappeared into the night like smoke. We stood there in that cemetery, surrounded by the dead, holding evidence that could bring down one of the most powerful men in the county. We need to move fast, Ike said, already walking toward the gate. If Harry's planning to eliminate you all, we can't wait. Marcus grabbed my arm. Mama, maybe we should just leave. Take Skylar and go. Start over somewhere else where Harry can't find us. I looked at my son, my brave, beaten, beautiful son, and I shook my head. If we run, Harry wins. And the next family he decides to destroy? They'll have no one to stop him. I clutched the envelope to my chest. Your grandmother didn't spend 30 years documenting evil so we could run from it. She did it so we could end it. We walked home in silence, each of us processing what we'd just learned. The weight of what we were about to do settling on our shoulders. When we got back to the house, Skylar was waiting, pacing the kitchen floor. Thank God, she breathed when she saw us. I was so worried. Did you find out anything? I set the envelope on the kitchen table. We found out everything. Monday morning arrived gray and overcast, the kind of morning that promises rain but hasn't decided when to deliver it. Skylar and I dressed carefully. She wore a conservative navy dress and pearls, the kind of outfit that said respectable Sterling family member. I wore my Sunday best, a cream-colored suit I'd bought for Marcus's wedding. We needed to look like we belonged walking into First National Bank at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. Ike and Marcus stayed behind, spreading all of Daryl's evidence across my kitchen table, organizing it, preparing the case we would build. The flash drive was being copied multiple times. Backups in case something went wrong. In my purse, I carried a small digital camera we'd borrowed from my neighbor. Old-fashioned but reliable. And untraceable. You ready? I asked Skylar as we stood at my front door. She was pale, her hands trembling slightly. But when she looked at me, her eyes were determined. For Marcus? For justice? Yes. I'm ready. The drive to First National took 15 minutes. Skylar drove her own car, a modest sedan her father had given her for her birthday. Not too flashy. Not drawing attention. We parked in the lot and sat for a moment, both of us gathering courage. My father does his banking here every Friday, Skylar said quietly. Mr. Lewis has known me since I was a child. He won't suspect anything. But he might call your father, I pointed out. Which is why we tell him this is a surprise for my father's birthday. That I'm retrieving some documents to have them professionally framed as a gift. Mr. Lewis loves that kind of sentimental gesture. Smart girl. She'd thought this through. We walked into the bank together. The lobby was busy with Monday morning customers. Tellers handling deposits and withdrawals. Bank officers in their offices, doors open, consulting with clients. And there in the large corner office was Mr. Raymond Lewis. Branch manager. 60 years old, gray hair, expensive suit. The kind of man who'd spent his whole career making wealthy people feel important. Skylar walked straight to his office and I followed. Miss Sterling. Mr. Lewis stood immediately, all smiles and warmth. What a pleasant surprise. How is your father? He's well, thank you. Mr. Lewis, this is Mrs. Johnson, a family friend. We need to access our family safe deposit box if that's possible. Of course, of course. He was already reaching for his keys. Is your father expecting you? Actually, it's a surprise. For his birthday next month. I want to retrieve some old family documents and have them professionally framed. You know how sentimental he can be. The lie came so easily from Skylar's lips. For a moment I was reminded that she was Harry Sterling's daughter. She'd learned from the master how to present a believable face. Mr. Lewis bought it completely. What a thoughtful daughter you are. Let me just verify the signature cards and we'll get you right in. 5 minutes later we were in the vault. The heavy door closed behind us with a soft thud that seemed to seal us in a tomb. Rows of metal boxes lined the walls. Large ones at the bottom. Small ones at the top. Our box, the Sterling family box, was one of the large ones. Number 247. You have 15 minutes, Mr. Lewis had said. Bank policy for security reasons. Will that be enough time? More than enough, Skylar had assured him. Now, standing in front of that box, Skylar's hands shook as she inserted the key. The box slid open. And I understood why Daryl had risked everything to stop Harry Sterling. Inside wasn't just money. It was an empire built on blood. Stacks of $100 bills, bound with rubber bands. I did a quick count, had to be close to $300,000. Cash that had never seen a tax form. But there was more. Photographs. Polaroids old and faded. Pictures of families being evicted. Of properties being bulldozed with people's belongings still inside. Of men with their faces beaten, kneeling in the dirt. Documents. Contracts signed under duress. The signatures shaky, some with tear stains visible on the paper. And a black leather notebook. Handwritten entries in Harry Sterling's unmistakable scrawl. I pulled it out with trembling hands and opened it to a random page. March 2018 Morales family. Refused $30,000 offer. Sent Mitchell and crew. Problem resolved. Family departed voluntarily. Property acquired for $5,000. Projected resale $300,000. Problem resolved. Departed voluntarily. Sanitized language for violence and terror. Page after page of entries. Years of crimes documented by the criminal himself. Oh my God, Skylar whispered, reading over my shoulder. He kept records. He actually kept records of everything he did. Arrogance, I said, already pulling out the camera. He thought he was untouchable. That no one would ever see inside this box. We worked quickly. I photographed every bill, every document, every page of that notebook. Skylar held things steady, her hands gradually stopping their shaking as purpose took over. The camera's digital counter clicked upward. 50 photos. 100. 150. We were on page 43 of the notebook when we heard voices outside the vault. Male voices. Agree. I don't care what she told you, Raymond. That's my box and I want to know why you let her access it without calling me first. Harry Sterling's voice. Skylar's face went white. He knows. How does he know? Someone must have called him, I said, my heart hammering. Mr. Lewis or a teller who recognized you or... What do we do? I made a split-second decision. I grabbed the leather notebook and shoved it into my purse. The original. The evidence in Harry's own handwriting. We face him. Head on. With dignity. The vault door swung open. And there stood Harrison Sterling, his face purple with rage, flanked by two large men I recognized from Marcus's description. His enforcers. Behind them, poor Mr. Lewis wringing his hands, clearly terrified. Skylar. Harry's voice was cold. Controlled. Deadlier than if he'd been shouting. Step away from that box. Now. No, Skylar said, and I heard her voice shake but hold. You're a criminal, father. And I won't help you hide it anymore. Harry's eyes flicked to me. And you. The poor seamstress. The low-class mother who thinks she can challenge me. I'm the mother of the man you beat and left for dead, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. And I'm the daughter of Doris Johnson, who worked in your father's house for 30 years. Who saw everything. Who wrote it all down. For the first time I saw fear flash across Harry Sterling's face. You're bluffing. My father burned all his records when he died. He burned his records. He didn't burn hers. I patted my purse, where Mama's documents rested along with Harry's notebook. And now I have yours too. Harry's hands clenched into fists. He took a step toward us. Mr. Sterling, Mr. Lewis said nervously, perhaps we should discuss this in my office. Shut up, Raymond. Harry didn't take his eyes off me. You have something that belongs to me. I want it back. It doesn't belong to you, I said. It belongs to justice. To every family you destroyed. To every person you intimidated and hurt. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Harry snarled. I own this town. I own these banks. I own the police and the courts. Who do you think they'll believe? Me or some old woman with delusions? They'll believe the evidence, Skylar said, stepping forward. The photographs. The recordings. The testimony of everyone you've hurt. Including your own daughter. Harry's face contorted. For a moment I thought he might actually strike her. Instead he turned to his men. Get the box. All of it. And get that purse from the old woman. The two enforcers started toward us. And that's when I did something I'd been preparing for my whole life without knowing it. I screamed. Not a scared scream. Not a helpless scream. A strategic scream. Loud. Piercing. The kind that echoes through bank lobbies and brings everyone running. The vault door was still open. My scream carried out into the main floor. Within seconds tellers appeared. Customers. Security guards. Help. I shouted. This man is threatening us. He's trying to steal evidence of his crimes. Harry's face went from purple to white. His enforcers stopped, looking uncertain. They could beat someone in a dark alley, but not in front of dozens of witnesses in a bank at 9:30 on a Monday morning. Mr. Lewis was stammering something about calling the police. Other bank employees were pulling out phones. And I saw it. The moment Harry Sterling realized he'd lost. Not the war. Not yet. But this battle. He straightened his tie, smoothed his jacket and put on the mask of a respectable businessman. My daughter is not well, he said to the gathering crowd, his voice oozing false concern. She's been under a great deal of stress. I came to help her, and this woman has been filling her head with nonsense. Then you won't mind if we call the police, I said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. Let them sort out who's telling the truth. Harry's jaw tightened. He knew if the police came, if there was an official report, if questions were asked about what we were doing in his safe deposit box, it would start an investigation he couldn't control. Skylar, he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Come home. We'll talk about this. Whatever Mrs. Johnson has told you. She hasn't told me anything I didn't already know, Skylar interrupted. I've lived in your house my whole life, Father. I've seen who you really are. She took my arm and together we walked out of that vault, through the crowd of onlookers, out of the bank and into the gray morning light. We didn't run. We walked with dignity, with purpose. Behind us I heard Harry Sterling shouting something, but I didn't look back. In my purse I had his notebook. The evidence that would end him. And I knew with absolute certainty that we'd just declared war. We drove straight back to my house, both of us shaking from adrenaline. Marcus and Ike met us at the door, their faces anxious. Did you get it? Marcus asked immediately. I pulled the leather notebook from my purse and set it on the kitchen table. We got it all. And this. For the next 3 hours we went through everything. Mama's documents. Daryl's evidence. Harry's own notebook. The photographs I'd taken in the vault. It was overwhelming. Devastating. Irrefutable. Ike, with his accountant's mind, started connecting the dots. Matching names from Mama's documents with names in Harry's notebook. Showing how the same families targeted by Sterling Sr. in the 60s had their descendants targeted by Sterling Jr. in recent years. A pattern of systematic oppression spanning 50 years. This is federal, Ike said finally, removing his reading glasses. This isn't just local corruption. This is organized crime. Racketeering. Tax evasion. Murder. Murder. The word hung in the air. Wallace Green. The community organizer. And how many others whose deaths had been labeled accidents. We need to get this to someone who can't be bought, I said. Someone outside Harry's sphere of influence. I know someone, Ike replied. My old army buddy Richard Torres. He's a federal prosecutor now, based in Atlanta. Specializes in corruption cases. If anyone can take this and run with it, it's him. But as we sat there planning our next move, reality set in. Harry Sterling knew we had evidence. He knew his daughter had turned against him. He knew his empire was threatened. And cornered animals are the most dangerous. That night around 8 o'clock we found out just how dangerous. I was in the kitchen making sandwiches. Nobody had eaten all day, too focused on the evidence. Skylar was on the phone with a lawyer Ike had recommended. Marcus was resting in the living room, his ribs still healing. That's when we heard it. The sound of breaking glass. Then the smell. The chemical. Growing stronger. Fire. Marcus shouted. I ran to the living room. Through the window I could see flames spreading across my front porch. Someone had thrown Molotov cocktails. Homemade firebombs. Out the back. Ike commanded, already helping Marcus to his feet. Yow. Skylar grabbed my arm. We ran through the kitchen, out the back door, into the yard where my chickens scattered in panic. Behind us I heard the whoosh of flames catching. Smelled the smoke. Felt the heat. My house. My home. The place where I'd raised Marcus, where I'd mourned my husband, where Mama's box had waited all these years. Burning. The evidence. I started to turn back. Ike grabbed me. We have copies. The originals are in my car. I moved them this afternoon just in case. Smart man. Always thinking ahead. We stood in the yard watching flames climb the walls of my house, and I felt rage so pure it almost choked me. Harry Sterling wasn't just trying to destroy evidence anymore. He was trying to destroy us. Sirens wailed in the distance. Fire trucks responding. But we all knew what the investigators would find. No witnesses. No evidence of who did it. Just a tragic fire at an old house with old wiring. Another accident courtesy of the Sterling family. But Harry Sterling had made a mistake. He thought burning my house would break me. Would make me afraid. Would make me back down. Instead, he'd given me proof of his desperation. And desperation meant he was scared. As the firefighters arrived and started battling the blaze, I turned to my family, because that's what they were now, all of them. My son. My brother. And Skylar, the daughter-in-law who'd chosen love over money, courage over comfort. Tomorrow, I said, my voice calm despite the flames behind me, we take everything to the federal prosecutor. Every document. Every photograph. Every recording. And we bury Harrison Sterling so deep he'll never see daylight again. He'll come after us again, Marcus said. Let him try. We're Johnsons. We don't break. We don't run. We fight. And as I watched my house burn, I thought about Mama Doris. About how she'd worked in that house for 30 years, watching evil, documenting it, waiting for the day when justice could be served. That day was here. Tomorrow we'd give Harry Sterling exactly what he deserved. My dear, that's where I need to pause this story. Because what came next, the federal investigation, the arrests, the trial, that's another tale entirely. But I want you to understand something important. This story isn't really about revenge. It's about the fact that evil only wins when good people stay silent. For 50 years, the Sterling family terrorized the poor families of Clay County. They did it because they could. Because they were rich and we were poor. Because they had power and we had none. Or so they thought. But they forgot something. They forgot that poor people see everything. Hear everything. Remember everything. My mama spent 30 years documenting evil, knowing that someday someone would need that information. She gave her daughter the tools for justice. And when the time came when my son was beaten and left in a ditch, I used those tools. Not with violence. Not by stooping to Harry Sterling's level. But with truth. With evidence. With the patient, careful work of connecting dots that powerful people thought no one was watching them draw. Did we win? Yes, my dear. We won. But that's a story for another time. What I want you to take away from this is simple. You are never as powerless as others want you to believe. The wealthy, the powerful, the ones who think they're untouchable, they make mistakes. They get comfortable. They forget that the woman scrubbing their floors, the man trimming their hedges, the girl serving their coffee, all of them have eyes and ears and memories. And when the time comes for justice, it's those eyes and ears and memories that bring down empires. This was Aunt Vivvy. And I thank you for sitting with me today, for hearing this story about a mother who protected her child the only way she knew how, with patience, evidence, and the knowledge passed down from a woman who'd spent her life watching and waiting. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt powerless against someone who seemed untouchable, know this. You are stronger than you think. Your voice matters. Your testimony matters. And sometimes the most powerful weapon is simply refusing to stay silent. Tomorrow I'll tell you the rest. The federal investigation. The trial. How Harry Sterling's empire crumbled. And how Marcus and Skylar built a new life from the ashes. Until then, my dear. Stand up for what's right even when it's hard. Document everything, because the truth is your greatest weapon. And remember, the powerful think the poor don't notice. That's their biggest mistake. Take care of yourself. Be brave. And never underestimate what a mother will do to protect her child.